Awesome.
So we're good to go.
Okay, we have about 30 people on now.
Okay.
Emily, do you want to go ahead with the introduction?
I would love to. Hi, everybody. I am so glad that you can join us today for this last topic in the Living with Parkinson's series. We will be talking about mental health, anxiety, and depression, particularly in the time of COVID. I am happy to introduce to you today our speaker, Karlene Harrison. She is a master's degree in social work from Michigan State. I had the pleasure of working with her a few years back at Macomb Oakland Regional Center, where she was a supports coordinator, and now she has branched off and is a clinical therapist with Great Lakes Psychology Group. So thank you, Karlene, and I will let you take it away.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And so, like everybody else, all of our work has changed, right, with how we do things now. As Emily said, I've been a social worker for a long time, and I have over 20 years experience in a lot of different settings. I've been a medical social worker in home health and hospice. I worked, as she said, as a case manager, so supports coordinator with adults with developmental disabilities. I've also worked with families in crisis through a shelter program many years ago. So when I started doing clinical therapy, I feel like I had a big background, a broad expanse of experience that brought me a different perspective maybe than some therapists who go right from school to doing clinical therapy. For the last 5 or 6 years, I've been exclusively doing therapy. And since March, it's all been telehealth, which I wasn't fully prepared for, but like everybody else, learned kind of how to go with it. I know your focus here is Parkinson's, and I'm certainly not an expert on Parkinson's. I've worked with a lot of older clients, and I've worked with clients with chronic illness. So I think, you know, there's some overlap there. So my words today are going to be about anxiety and depression, kind of with a focus on older people, as well as people with illness already. So although I don't know a lot about Parkinson's specifically, I think that there's a lot of overlap. So, and I apologize in advance, the slides were provided by Emily, and my talking isn't going to exactly match them. So that will make Kelly's job hard today as she tries to click through the slides for me. So anything that looks weird is my fault, not hers. So just so you know. So many individuals, might have a prior history of anxiety and depression. But for some, these things don't even manifest until they're dealing with their illness. The illness actually kind of propels them into this situation where they develop clinical anxiety or more serious depression. So I think you can probably click on, we'll see what's, yeah, so lots of mental health issues. That's kind of an overview of what might be going on for people. So you can go to the next one. We're going to talk about anxiety first. So again, the feelings that people have, there's some overlap there. Anxiety hasn't been studied as much in the older populations, but it seems to be showing up in greater numbers, especially as we navigate the current pandemic situation. Many older, vulnerable people might experience additional isolation issues. Family and friends might be either unable or unwilling to assist them during this health crisis. So that's been something that I've seen in the clients that are coming to me, just that increased fear about not being able to have the same types of connections that people had before. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about grief and how it relates to illness. The one thing I think is interesting when we look at the stages of grieving, and some of you may know this, but the original intent Kubler-Ross had, the interviews she did were actually with the people that were dying. So when we sometimes apply these stages to our bereavement in our own process, but they were actually originally meant to apply to the person who was at end of life. So that's something that I don't know, I find interesting, and I like to say that out loud whenever we're looking at the stages of grief. Because it does play into people doing their own grief work, because a lot of times people don't want to accept. They get to that point, and that word is sometimes triggering for people that are going through grief, that word acceptance. So that can be reframed a little bit sometimes. So anxiety symptoms for older people are often expressed in physical ways, and this can happen for younger people as well, but they might have tension, racing heart, chest pain, shortness of breath, dizziness, sleep issues. All those things are common. And so before 2020, it might be common for people to go to the ER when they had these feelings, thinking they were having a heart attack or having some sort of physical issue. Now, many older, vulnerable people, they're afraid to go to the ER. They don't want to contact COVID. They don't want to, burden the health system more than it already is. So they may be having these symptoms, and they may be at home, and they may be feeling more isolated and more scared, than they would have been before. So that's one way that's affecting them. Depression is also on the rise. I think, it seems logical, right? We're in a pandemic. We're going through a lot of social unrest. There's a lot of things going on. And I think that depression in many people has been on the rise. Some of the statistics that I'm going to share are a little dated, but many, many more people are seeking help for depression and anxiety due to the current crisis. So how prevalent is depression in the elderly population anyways? The CDC estimates that 15 to 20% of Americans that are 65 and older suffer from depression. So that's in the whole population. So that's not even looking at people with chronic illness or people that that might have other things going on. And then it's going to raise during this time. I think when they look back at statistics for 2020, it's going to be even higher. Many of these cases, the depression didn't even present until later in life. So again, there could be other things going on with illnesses that would trigger that. So just throwing this question out, usually when I'm talking, I'm looking at a room full of people and not the computer. So I'll ask people questions. So I'm not sure if anybody wants to throw in an answer, but what are some symptoms we might see in our people that we work with that might indicate depression? Kelly had said that you can use the chat box and or speaking, either one. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or how it might differ in older people?
I did give everyone permission to unmute yourself. So if you have a question or comment, you can go ahead and speak. If not, then feel free to type it in the chat and I'll read it out for you.
Oh, you'll read them. Okay, good. I clicked on it and now I don't know how to unclick it. There we go.
We do have a comment in the chat from Tom. It says apathy.
Okay. Yeah. Just kind of giving up, feeling like there's not a lot you can do about it. So why bother, kind of thing. Definitely.
Hello. Yes, I'm sorry, I reached the wrong number.
Was someone making a comment? I can't really hear. Maybe not. So, just a general low mood sometimes in people, loss of interest in activities. Sometimes they lose interest before like sometimes that's a physical thing, like they are unable to do some things that they used to be able to do. So that can create that sense of depression and low mood, feeling hopeless, withdrawing. So those are some things to look for. Older adults also will have aches and pains. You know, they might have unexplained aches and pains, or things become more aggravated or more intense.
We have another comment in the chat from Gary. He says crabby and angry.
Absolutely. That is another thing. If you're older person, or your person that you're working with is normally easygoing, and you're seeing some changes in their disposition that way, that can definitely be an indication that there's some mental health issues going on, because they may not even understand what's going on. So that can exhibit itself that way. It's also harder to diagnose depression in older adults. And it's true for a number of reasons. The elderly, they might not want to admit that they're sad or lonely, because they don't want to be a burden to anyone else. And then they might show some more subtle signs of depression, such as what were mentioned, the agitation, irritability. Sometimes it's even physical. They might be wringing their hands. Older people that are nervous do that a lot. It's kind of it's a tell kind of for that. Sometimes there's overlap with dementia and depression symptoms, so that can confuse the issue as well. Certainly someone with dementia can have depression, but when you're trying to diagnose, you kind of have to look at the differences. Dementia will be a slower onset over time, where depression might seem more showing up more rapidly. Depressed people are generally oriented to person, place, and time, whereas with dementia, you're going to have that confusion and disorientation. Depressed people are going to have difficulty concentrating, but their memory issues aren't necessarily going to be affected. So it's, you know, it can be tricky sometimes to diagnose. Older adults, you can go to the next slide. I don't know what, yeah, you can keep going. Let's see. Coping strategies. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But you can leave that one up for now. Older adults, they might have a greater risk of depression due to medical conditions. So obviously Parkinson's is one of those, as well as, you know, having prior stroke or heart disease, thyroid issues, dementia, as I mentioned. With heart disease, they have done studies where they've connected depression, clinical depression, to people that have had heart surgeries and heart diseases, and they don't even really know why, but they continue to study that for sure. Certain medications can worsen or even cause depression. So that's something to be careful with for anyone, but especially for the older population. Older people metabolize medications differently. So that's something too that doctors, you know, and professionals should be aware of. Some medications that can cause issues, blood pressure, some blood pressure medications, some heart medications, certainly sleeping pills, some cholesterol drugs can all affect an individual's mood. So this can certainly vary from person to person, but can be a factor. So again, if someone's exhibiting changes, even as non-medical helpers, that's something to rule out, right? You rule out the medical stuff. So even when I have clients come to me for therapy, especially if they're older clients, I always make that part of my assessment, looking at what medications they might be on, and encourage them to talk to their doctor about the side effects that might be contributing to their feelings of low mood. So, the other things that contribute to depression, especially in the elderly, you know, elderly people experience a lot of loss, and this is where the grief comes in. And it's not just loss in the form of death. Certainly, as people get older, they lose more people. My mom is 90 and she's in pretty good health. But she talks all the time about her friends being gone, right? And one more person's died and one more person's gone. And that's really hard for people, especially if they're still active-ish. I mean, with COVID, how active can they be? But, you know, if they're still involved in doing things and wanting to be part of things as they see their friends and others, you know, pass away, that's hard. But there's other forms of loss, loss of function when they become physically unable to do things, even simple things around the house, like making dinner or changing a light bulb, yard work, kinds of things that they may have enjoyed doing. They start to see themselves as less than and maybe feel like they've lost their purpose. Losing independence, losing the ability to drive is enormous. Maybe they're unable to live alone anymore, or maybe they're still in their house, but caregivers are coming in to do housework and things, and that makes them feel a certain way. So all of those things contribute. These are all forms of loss, and they all should be taken seriously, and a person should be allowed to grieve, you know, the loss of their physical abilities and emotional parts of it. Roles change as people age as well. That can contribute to depression. If someone's used to being the head of the house, I see chronic pain just popped up. Absolutely. Chronic pain is enormous. Losing your peace, right? That sense of being able to just be comfortable physically. That's enormous and can contribute to the depression for sure. So the bottom line is the importance of treatment for people. So as we, you know, as we serve people and help people in different capacities, we all, as helping professionals, have a different role in that. But watching for the symptoms is important in doing our part to help people get treatment. The very least, untreated depression can lead to, you know, reduction in quality of life. And, you know, at the very worst, it can lead to suicide attempts or completed suicide. And the older population is actually one of the most at-risk populations for suicide, which is really sad if you think about it. And, you know, that's another whole topic, right? But just paying attention to it, looking for the ways we can help people rise above, pull out of, treat their depression. Accurately diagnosing, getting people into the right treatment programs. Medication isn't always the answer either. I mean, you know, everyone has a different feeling about medication. It certainly can be helpful for a lot of people, but studies do show that when it's used with talking therapy together, it's the best outcomes. So it's something to keep in mind. And we're going to talk about some of the coping strategies there that are on those later slides too, the mindfulness and the relaxation stuff. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm just going to pause. Does anyone have any questions? Give myself a stop listening to myself talk. Any questions or other comments that people want to make at this point? Okay. So how do we accurately diagnose and treat in either aging populations or populations that have, you know, the chronic health issues? Education is really one of the biggest ones. Education for primary care doctors, other healthcare professionals, and again, sometimes it's frustrating, but doing our part to try to help educate. There's a few organizations that have resources. There's the National Institute on Mental Health has a lot of educational materials for professionals as well as individuals. The National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, NAMI.org. That's one that is a go-to for me. They always have good presentations and they have good resources available for people on their website. And educating the people, the elders, our population, or the people we work with, helping them understand their depression, helping them understand it is a serious condition, one that needs addressed by medical or professionals, clinical professionals. Older people, you know, they don't respond real well to clinical terminology. So, like, for example, I have the older family members that when they go to the doctor, they do those little assessments. Someone's asking, could you write? Oh, sure. Yep. I can put them in the chat box. I can put them in the chat box in a minute. Or let me do it right now. If I can figure this out.
I can write them for you if you need me to, Karlene.
Okay, so NAMI is the one I know by heart because that's one of my go-tos. And the other one is, I'll just copy it, see if I can figure that out. We've all learned lots of new skills since March, I think. There we go. Yeah, so, you know, many older people, they'll go to the doctor and they do those, even the medical, their primary care will do those little depression screenings with them. And they'll ask them, you know, do you feel depressed? Do you feel low mood? And I tell you, I have people in my family that will, you know, everything's great. You know, they tell the doctor what they think they want them to hear. And they answer those questions in ways that would not indicate depression when they are depressed. So one of the things that we can do is help talk about the symptoms rather than the clinical terminology. So for example, you ask them, how are they sleeping? You know, talk about poor sleep, talk about their appetite, talk about things that will improve the specific symptoms that either you're seeing or that you help identify, rather than using the clinical terminology. And I have to find myself doing that with clients as well, because they really reject those words. They don't see themselves as depressed. They have a specific idea in their mind about what a depressed person looks like. It's someone who stays in bed all day, or someone who drinks alcohol and doesn't participate in life, or whatever it is. They have this image and they're not that, so they don't identify with it. So that can be tricky. But having those conversations that are more real with people, not just elders, but people in general, about what their symptoms look like, and that can help, you know, drill down to what's really going on. And you can help educate the people themselves. You know, over 50% of adults know little or nothing about depression. And I often forget this because this is my work, right? So it's always, I'm like, of course people know what depression is, but they don't. And, you know, we have to help educate others in our lives, as well as clients or people that we work with. So there's a lot of self-care tools. And
we have like 18.
One of the things that we can do is encourage people to exercise. Even small amounts of physical activity can help to reduce and improve mood and reduce those low feelings. Connecting with others, right? I used to talk about the importance of church and family and volunteer and senior centers. Well, a lot of that has to be looked at in different ways now. We have to rethink that. We have to help older adults with chronic illnesses. We have to help them figure out how to connect with others. And this is an enormous challenge right now. And I don't have any great answers. Everyone keeps saying we're all in this together, and it's true. But for people that are isolated already before COVID hit, you know, it's double or triple hard now for them. Enormous challenge. I know that many churches are making efforts to safely engage and reach older people in ways that they can, either sending volunteers to visit them when it was nicer weather through the, you know, through the yard window visits and things like that. Many of the options have been taken away, so we really have to look at that. And like I said, I don't have all the answers, but you have to get creative sometimes with that. Sleep and diet are very important and can relate to mood changes. Finding activities that the person enjoys, again, a challenge with COVID. You have to modify some of the activities and some of the things that we might do or suggest to people. I have a lot of clients that their go-to stress reducer was shopping, you know, going to the mall, walking around. And that's, you know, a lot of malls don't let you do that anymore, the window shopping, even if they're open for shoppers. One of my clients said that the security guard came up and told her she had to go in a store. She couldn't just walk around. So it's like, that's not even an option for people anymore. So how can we help? How can we help our own friends in our own families that might be isolated or that might be dealing with some of these things? We can, you know, invite them places that are safe, walk in the park. Now the weather's shifted here, but something that do when it's good weather. Encouraging people to follow through with the treatment program is really important. And we can do that with clients, we can do that with family. Medication compliance is very important as well. One of the other things that can help people feel better about, like if they've lost some of their abilities, you can help them break down tasks, right, into smaller, both more manageable emotionally, but more manageable physically. So again, this takes some creativity and it would be dependent on the exact task, but you can let them do the amount that they can still do, right? So if it's with cooking, maybe it's not safe for them to use a stove anymore, but they can measure or they can stir or they can help you make the you know, whatever it is you're making. They can help with certain ways. So that can reduce their feelings of just worthlessness, like they can't do anything kind of thing. And again, that takes some creativity and it takes some energy, but you know, it is possible. And most importantly, I think that, you know, listening to people, and again, listening to our clients, listening to our family, our friends, really hear what they're saying to make those more subtle assessments for depression issues. Any talk about death or suicide, them saying that they feel like they're a burden, those things should be taken seriously. Letting their doctor know, letting their therapist know. If it's a situation with someone that you work with or you know, the population that you serve, try to have a family meeting so you can involve others that are in their life to help them sort through some of the things they're going through. It's hard though, sometimes to identify that stuff. It can be tricky for sure. So the last part of what I want to talk about is self-care for ourselves, right? Because, you know, we're not good to anybody else if we're faltering ourselves. And I think that, as you all know, self-care is very challenging for helping professionals. And it's more challenging now during the time of COVID. It's changed everything. It's changed how we do our work. It's changed how we do trainings. It's changed how we do meetings. It's changed everything. But the fundamental reasons or the fundamental things that have caused burnout and stress, those things are still there. Those things haven't changed, right? We talk about burnout as, you know, being in a situation where maybe we have unrealistic goals, or we're expected to be too many things to too many people. Maybe working under rules that seem unreasonable. Or doing work that's in conflict with our values. Feeling trapped in a job for financial reasons or demographic reasons. So all those things haven't changed, but our ability to respond to them in healthy ways has been affected by the current health crisis. So it's not as easy right now to go on vacation, right? Some of the go-to things that we used to do to feel better. It's not even as easy to take a day off, because if you're working at home, all your work's still there, right? So traveling can cause more stress for us right now. So that's kind of not a good thing. Getting a babysitter, going out to do adult things. This may not be as easy an option in 2020 as it used to be. Going out to eat, going to movies, concerts, all these things that maybe we would have done as self-care, we can't do anymore, or we feel less comfortable doing, or it's more difficult to do. Traditional social life that many of us used to have to reduce our stress levels is maybe not available, or maybe doesn't feel as safe. So where does that leave us, right? What do we do? How do we care for ourselves? How do we keep ourselves healthy and safe for our, not just our clients and our work, but for our families and for like living, right? How do we keep ourselves from feeling depressed? So everybody's probably got some things that they've done that are working. I encourage you to share those with each other. You know, if you have the ability to, I started attending, one of my colleagues was doing a supervision for people working on their licensure. And when COVID hit, it became online, but she expanded it to be more of a, like, let's get together once a week and let's just be in the same space and talk about cases if we want, or talk about, you know, our people we live with that are bugging us or whatever. So it was almost like a little support group, but it was just formed by, you know, a small group of colleagues that decided that was something that was helpful. So I encourage you to figure that stuff out in your own circles of what might work for you. Another thing you can do if you're working from home, it's really, really important to have intentional space for your work. Don't have your work strewn all over your house, you know, where you sometimes sit in the couch, sometimes at the dining room table. Even if it's just, I'll tell you right now, I could turn the camera around and show you. I have a TV tray, literally a TV tray and my laptop in a corner of one of my rooms. But this is the space, right? It's not fancy, it's not big and elaborate, but this is where my work stays because I'm solely working from home. It has to be intentional, or that overlap is really, can be really stressful for people. Take intentional breaks from your work, which in the office, it was easier because you'd go to the bathroom, you'd go to the, you know, get something from the kitchen or the break room, and you'd interact with coworkers. You'd have those built-in things during the day. And that has to be more intentional when you're at home. Make sure you have working hours, right? Even if you work 10-hour days or 12-hour days, don't let them become 18-hour days. And again, part of that is keeping your actual physical work in a space so that it doesn't strew all over your house. The other thing that I found to be very different for me since March, I used to use my drive home as my decompression time from my day. As Emily knows, you know, when I worked at Mork, we needed a lot of that decompression. So my drive home after my last visit of the day would be that time for me so that I could put my day behind me, get home. It was very symbolic. You get out of your car, shut the door, you lock your car. And for me, that was it. I walk in the house and it's different. So working at home, you don't have that. And it has to be very intentional what you do at the end of your workday, because it's very different. So each person kind of has to figure that out for themselves. But it is important. And so then the next few slides suggest getting book clubs. Book clubs are good. I have a client who's in her book club moved to online, and that's really helping her. Senior centers, yep. Yeah, and the problem, so a lot of churches are doing that as well, you know, with the Zoom, and a lot of older people have trouble with it. So again, we have to all help as we can. And there was a question about family caregivers reducing feelings of burnout with being home all the time and having little opportunities for relief. That's a really relevant issue. Caregiving is hard, and when somebody's got someone in the home that they're caring for, and then the other adults are now working at home, I think that's kind of what you were getting at. So everybody's in the house and everything feels tight and crowded and stressful. So again, sharing some of this information with the other people in the home, they need to have an intentional space for work, right? So like if one of your clients is a caregiver and their person has a chronic illness that they're caring for, and their spouse is now working at home, I mean, that's a scenario, right? So that person working from home really needs to apply some of these things and have intentional space, intentional work hours, you know, all that stuff has to be done in a little bit different way. I think that the stress related to caregiving is, you know, that's a whole weekend seminar. I mean, that's like when I worked in home care and hospice, that was a recurring theme all the time with helping people figure that out. COVID has changed a lot of that because you don't probably have as many opportunities for that respite or for other people stepping up to help. So I think that getting creative and trying to work that stuff out has become even more important. But I think that having the honest conversations with the people that are in your house with you is where it needs to start. And as a social worker or as someone working with a family like that, facilitating those family discussions is sometimes helpful. I did a lot of that when I worked in hospice because you'd have family members, you'd have your primary caregiver, and then you'd have other family members, and everybody would have opinions about how things should be. And just bringing everybody together and kind of facilitating that conversation can be helpful sometimes. So I hope that answered somewhat the question. One of the things that I think we do, most of us do well, is we give our clients suggestions for relaxation techniques. I know I do this all the time, and then I forget to apply them to myself, right? So, excuse me, all the things we tell clients to do: take a quick walk outside, 5 minutes, can make you feel better. Mindful breathing. The PowerPoint has, I think the next few slides, there's some exercises on guided imageries and meditative breathing. Even taking a few minutes between clients or between meetings can really help. These things really do help, and they sound really simple, but they do help. They don't change anything. They don't change the problems. They don't fix anything, but they help you kind of bring you down to a level of responding in different ways. So adequate sleep is important. for us, for our clients, for caregivers, proper nutrition. You know, these are the things we don't always want to listen to, but they're very true, and they really do make a difference. No, I think so. The slides, and again, I said in the beginning, and I apologize, the PowerPoint was, Kelly was moving them. I don't know.
Yeah, I can move them if you want. I didn't know.
Yeah, you can jump ahead to a few. So yeah, I explained in the beginning that the slides aren't exactly, or really at all, connected. It's broadly connected to how I'm talking, just because the slides were already prepared and Emily had those, and so I apologize for that. But these next few do talk about guided imagery, which is a wonderful technique. You can do it yourself, or you can use apps, or the old-fashioned CDs or tapes that have the meditation on them. And it's it really does work. And I work with clients with trauma a lot that get your own happy place, kind of, if you want to call it that, or your comfort place, the place you feel most comfortable. And you can do those guided imageries on your own even. But for people that need help with that, it's there are apps, there are all sorts of meditation and applications now through the smartphones. I have a lot of clients that use those. Usually they're younger clients, but I have some people that are older that use them as well, and they find them to be very helpful. So those are some things that, again, it doesn't change anything, but it can help you, bring you back to center. It can help ground you, just kind of keep you more even. And these are good examples in the slides of things you can do. The grounding one is really good and important. When we talk about grounding, it's kind of a flowy term, right? But when you think about it, your feet planted on the ground, what that feels like. What apps do you recommend? So there's a few. There's one called Calm. That's I think it's a subscription service. Headspace, I think, has a free option on it. I have some clients that use that. I can type those in here. Headspace. And then Calm, I think, is mostly like an application that people, it would be like a service that you would join, kind of thing. But many of them have some free parts to it. We're not going to practice. Sorry, not sorry. I don't know. So we talked about some resources. I like the idea of reaching out to senior centers and trying to get them to maybe shift how they're doing things. Let them know there's a need for that, like in whatever community you're in, that maybe the senior center could help in some way with that.
I can read that question out loud. It's from Gary, directed towards Emily. It says, do you have access to any home health agencies that could come to your home for short periods, an hour or two, to give you some respite care?
So that's a great question, Gary. Yes, I absolutely do. We have a referral list for some home care providers throughout the state. I see that you mentioned an hour or two of respite. I don't know how flexible that is. I know that most respite care providers have some sort of a minimum shift amount. It's usually 3 to 4 hours. So I don't know if you were giving an hour or two as just an example, but it's normally a little bit more than that. But yes, we absolutely do have providers that we work with on a regular basis, and I'm happy to speak with you about those after the presentation if you'd like.
Has that changed much, Emily, with COVID? I mean, has that become a harder option to get?
Yes, and that's a really good point, Karlene. So we know that even prior to COVID, there have been caregiver shortages throughout really the country, certainly throughout Michigan too. And unfortunately, the pandemic has only increased that issue for a variety of reasons. So yes, it is more difficult to find companies right now, but it is certainly not impossible. You know, the issue of caregivers making quite little money, to be honest, for the type of work they do, again, was certainly an issue prior to COVID, and it's only been exacerbated since the pandemic. But there are a number of providers that I'm still able to work with that have been able to locate staffing for our folks.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, with the COVID, with the health crisis, it's made it really hard for people to find volunteers. Like you used to have churches, you know, you'd send someone out to sit with the people that were lonely or to give the caregivers a break. And nobody feels safe doing that anymore. And I think that's taken away a huge part of the resources that, you know, used to be able to tap into.
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I don't know, let me look at this. So yeah, clearly communicating is important. I think everybody's feeling frustrated. I think that's a common denominator across the board for both people working with people as well as the people that are sick and just not feeling well. And the chronic illness, you know, you're feeling even more vulnerable to the health problems that are going on. You can move that forward and see what's next. Again, we talked about some of these, looking for red flags or looking for things that indicate depression or anxiety, and all of these things are important to watch for. And the irritability, when it's out of character for the person, is a huge factor. And that could mean that they're in more pain though as well. So assessing for the medical piece first is always important, even if we're not medical personnel, but asking the questions and encouraging them to talk to their doctors about it, because sometimes the pain can cause the irritability as well. Or in addition to, and isolation is just a huge one, and that's become worse beyond belief for many, many people. So, any other questions, comments, anything anybody wants to say or ask in the chat box? I appreciate the ideas. The book club is a good one, for sure.
Hi, this is Renuka Surati. Hello?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my husband have Parkinson, but he don't even have voice. So, I mean, there is no communication. He cannot talk to, because his vocal cord is paralyzed.
Okay.
He cannot eat or drink nothing by mouth. He's on feeding tube.
Yeah. That's got to be very, very hard. So his voice, he's lost that functionality.
Yeah, we try to go to the ENT and they try to help vocal cord, but did not help because we had speech therapy and all those. But like day by day, he was losing and losing. And now at the point, he don't have no voice.
Okay. Is he at home with you?
Yes, he is with me. Yes.
Okay. So how is his mental health, would you say?
Mental health is no problem. He's very good. He have very good memory. It's only the voice is not there. So like communication is the big problem, but sometimes he try to type it in the phone or something so we can see. But you know how his trimmer of the hand is shaky. So
Yeah.
when he wanna write, it goes like, you know, something else, you know?
Yep. So you have to get creative in ways to communicate, because our voice is certainly the thing we usually communicate with. But you know him really well, right? Obviously. And you probably are able to help figure out what his needs are, I would think.
Oh yeah, definitely, yes.
And that's got to be hard for him, though, feeling that he's maybe has things he wants to say or communicate and he can't. That trapped feeling.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, that's hard.
So is there any other like, I mean, we try, like we went to the ENT doctor and I said something like if he can voice out, like, you know, at least we can hear yes or no, or like, you know, call by name, not long sentence, but at least like, you know, he speaks something. Is there any technique or something like can help him?
You know, the only thing that I can think of, and I don't know what they're called, Emily, maybe you remember, you were more recently than I, but we had some folks that were nonverbal. And I know with the shaking, the typing's hard, but the kids had like it was like a computer board, but there would be pictures on it. And so there would be not having to type words, but it would be, do you know what I'm talking about? So I don't know if those devices still exist or if that would be something that maybe somebody could figure out a grant or application to try to get him, because that I don't.
Yeah. I do know what you're talking about, Karlene. I do believe they're still used. So I think there would be the option of maybe like a picture board type thing, or there's things, and Karlene, correct me if I'm wrong, but I called Go Talk devices, where you can pre-program messages that the person can use like on a little computer to answer, you know, very brief closed-ended questions. It might be helpful for him to be evaluated by a speech and language pathologist. That would be my suggestion, would be.
I think she said that they did have someone in. Did you
they?
say him?
Well, I wasn't quite clear. I guess maybe.
Yeah, I can't hear her now.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend speaking with his physician, his neurologist in particular, and trying to advocate to get him a referral for a speech and language pathologist. They are really the experts with that area, as certainly their job title indicates.
Yeah.
Actually, we talked to our doctor, and I mean, we've been using that speech pathology like for, I would say, 2-3 years. So this is the year, like 2020, we did not go because of the COVID, and same thing on top of that, like, you know, my doctor says, like, you know, PCP, he says, because his vocal cord is paralyzed, so it's not gonna help him even though you go to speech pathology. So
So it sounds like looking for alternative methods
alternative, yes,
are
exactly.
really gonna be what he needs. So yeah, I would definitely suggest looking into like a picture board or one of the GoTalk devices.
So it's available, or you have to download on the phone, or
You know, that's a really good question. There might be apps like on your cell phone that you can get now. I hadn't even thought of that, but it's certainly worth checking. I don't know of any off the top of my head, but it's worth checking into. But what I am referring to are specific devices that help folks communicate who can't communicate verbally.
and what is that called again? I'm sorry.
The one that I know of is called Talk.
GoTalk.
I don't know if you know of anything else.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the names.
Is that what you were
I'm
thinking
bad
of?
with names.
Yeah. Yep, and Margaret suggested a very large keyboard. That's a great idea too. Or sign language.
So I know that we're almost out of time. Trying to be sensitive to that. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, you can feel free to email me or you know, or through Emily, get in touch. I think she put my information on there.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
So, and again, I apologize that the slides and the speech weren't together, but it was what it was. So hopefully, hopefully we all learned something today.
Yes, I definitely did. Thank you so much, Karlene. I really appreciate Karlene did this on very short notice too. So I am so appreciative, Karlene, that you made the time to fit this into your schedule today. And you really offered folks some great insight and great tips. And you know, if anybody has any need to follow up, please get in touch with me or go ahead and get in touch with Karlene directly.
All right. Well, I appreciate the opportunity and I hope that everyone enjoys the rest of their day today.
Thank you.
Karlene. All right.
Well, thank you, Kelly, for doing the slides.
Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone who attended.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Karlene.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.